That leads into active labor and progressing labor, which is the stage where you're dilating. Okay, so with this one, you're actually recognizing that your contractions are doing something, and they're not always doing the same thing. So one contraction might be letting your baby get into a better position. This is why you don't want to break your waters. This is why you don't want membrane sweeps, because that can also weaken the bag of waters and lead to your waters rupturing prematurely. If they do that, your baby can't get into a proper position because they don't have the squishy water balloon anymore, and they don't have that cushion of fluid to protect them from the contractions. So if your uterus is being squeezed at this point in the game, your uterus is no longer just warming up. Your uterus is also pulling up the muscles into a fundal pressure. So picture this as your uterus, okay? You've got a nice, tight, closed cervix, okay? Now, as you pull the muscle up, that opens the cervix. So it's like when you're pulling like a sock and you're trying to bunch up a sock and get it up onto your foot. It's like that. It's very much like that. I don't have a doll small enough to fit in here. None of my daughter's dolls are small enough to fit in here. But the idea is, again, it's like the uterus is pulling those muscles upwards. So what you're looking at is it's pulling it up, and then the result of that is the cervix opening. But there gets to be a certain point during that your baby's head is like right there, and the bulging bag of waters is right there. And then that's when birth is basically imminent and can't shut down anymore because the cervix cannot close up against the baby's head. Until that point that the baby's head is actually on the cervix and like pushing through the cervix, which is transition, the hardest part and also the shortest part, you can still have your labor stall because the cervix can still close up or labor can stop. So with progressing labor, what you're really looking for is to watch the contractions. It's not just a dull ache anymore. And it's not just like a squeezing and releasing. Instead, there's going to be a point where you're going up the wave or up a roller coaster, as one of my clients said. You're going all the way up, and there's a very, very, very sharp peak. And it's at this peak that is the most painful point of the contraction. Up until that point, it's just slowly building up. And then it gets to the sharp peak, and you're like, oh my God, oh my God. And then it lowers down again. So what you want to do is you want to recognize, okay, it's coming. I can feel the wave coming. And instead of tensing up, as a lot of people do, they tense up and they're like, it's going to be really bad. Instead, you take the deep breath. You feel that peak, you anticipate it, and then you breathe out. Or you vocalize, or you move through it, or you find some way to get through that sharp peak. But then after that peak is done, it's no more. Now, some of these contractions, as I said, are going to be to shift your baby into a better position. And some of these contractions are going to be opening your cervix and pulling up that fundal pressure. There's going to be a point then where the contractions are also pushing down. So there's 4 different types of contractions. There's the warm up that you get in early labor and prodromal labor and your practice contractions. Then there's the ones that have the way of shifting your baby. You might feel it in your back as well, in which case that's your body signaling you to get into a different position to help baby move. So you might feel a lot of pain in your hips or pain in your back, and that's back labor. But back labor actually has the function of saying, hey, get on your hands and knees or do a different position because baby needs to shift here. And once you recognize that, baby's able to move down. There's the other contractions that your body will signal you to be like, okay, now things are really moving and the cervix is opening. And you're going to feel that. You're going to feel the difference between the contractions if you really pay attention. This is why with unmedicated true natural birth, it's so much easier to deal with than if you're going with Pitocin, because Pitocin, on the other hand, is just smacking the uterus to try to get it to do its thing. And it's not following this rhythm. And then finally, the last set of contractions that you're going to feel at the end, the transition, is when the contractions actually push your baby down. And this is intense. However, it's not the most painful part. The most painful part is just when you have all that pressure and there's that bulging bag of waters, but then the water's released or the baby's head's out, and it's like, oh, okay, I can do this. It's really not that bad. So when you recognize that and you understand that your uterus is doing a job, it is a muscle, not an organ, a muscle. And this muscle has a function. So if you tune into what your contractions are doing and where your baby is moving, you can actually work with this. And I'm going to teach you some coping mechanisms to be able to get through this. Same ones I teach my clients and the same ones that I used myself.